By John Hawkins, 37-year-old farmer. I never believed in monsters. Not really. Sure, I'd watch the occasional horror flick with my wife on movie nights, but I always chalked it up to Hollywood magic and overactive imaginations. That was before last autumn, before the night that changed everything. Now I know the truth. Monsters are real, and they're far more terrifying than anything you've seen on the silver screen. My name's John Hawkins. I'm a 37-year-old farmer, born and raised in the rolling hills of rural Wisconsin. For generations, my family has tended to these lands, growing corn and raising cattle. It's not an easy life, but it's honest work, and I've always taken pride in it. That is, until the nightmares began. It started with the cattle. At first, we thought it was just coyotes or maybe a particularly bold wolf pack. We'd find a calf here and there, torn to shreds, its innards spread across the pasture like some sick finger painting. But as the attacks escalated, we realized we were dealing with something far worse. I remember the first time I saw the tracks. They were massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf print, with claw marks that dug deep into the soft earth. But what really sent a chill down my spine was the way they changed. At the edge of the woods, they were clearly animal prints, but as they neared the barn, they began to morph. The back paws elongated, taking on an almost human shape. I tried to rationalize it, tell myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but deep down I knew. Something unnatural was stalking my land. The attacks grew more frequent, more brutal. We'd wake up to find entire herds slaughtered, their bodies torn apart with inhuman strength. The local sheriff was at a loss. He talked about bringing in wildlife experts, setting up cameras, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew, just as I did, that we were dealing with something beyond his jurisdiction. It was my wife, Sarah, who first said the word we'd all been thinking, but were too scared to voice. "Werewolf," she whispered one night, her eyes wide with terror as we listened to the distant howls echoing across the fields. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell her she'd been watching too many late-night monster movies, but the word hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of truth. As the full moon approached, the entire community was on edge. Farmers armed themselves, keeping vigil over their livestock. Children were kept indoors after sunset. The usual bustling small-town life ground to a halt, replaced by a suffocating atmosphere of dread. On the night of the full moon, I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't sit idly by while this thing terrorized my home, my livelihood. Armed with my trusty hunting rifle and a pocket full of silver bullets, because at this point, why not, I set out into the moonlit fields. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and something else, something feral. My boots crunched softly on the frost-covered grass as I made my way toward the tree line, where we'd found most of the tracks. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. I'd been in these woods 1,000 times before, but never had they felt so alien, so hostile. As I neared the edge of the forest, a blood-curdling howl split the night. It was close, too close. My hands shook as I raised my rifle, scanning the darkness between the trees. That's when I saw them, two glowing eyes burning with an otherworldly hunger. They were at least 7 feet off the ground, belonging to a creature that stood upright like a man, but was covered in thick, matted fur. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I could hear my own ragged breathing, see the steam of the creature's breath in the cold night air. Then, with a snarl that sounded almost like laughter, it charged. I fired, the muzzle flash momentarily illuminating the monster in all its horrific glory. Muscles rippled beneath its fur, its jaws open wide to reveal rows of dagger-like teeth. My shot went wide, and before I could chamber another round, it was upon me. The impact knocked me to the ground, knocking the wind out of me. Claws raked across my chest, tearing through my jacket like it was tissue paper. I could feel its hot breath on my face, smell the stench of rotting meat. In that moment, staring into its feral eyes, I was certain I was going to die. But some primal instinct kicked in. My hand found a rock on the ground beside me, and with all the strength I could muster, I smashed it against the creature's temple. It reared back, momentarily stunned, giving me just enough time to scramble for my rifle. As the werewolf lunged again, I fired. This time, my aim was true. The silver bullet struck it square in the chest. The howl it let out was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Part animal roar, part human scream. It staggered backwards, clawing at the wound, before collapsing to the ground. I approached cautiously, rifle still trained on the twitching form. As I watched, the creature's body began to change. The fur receded, the snout shortened, and within minutes, where the monster had fallen, lay the naked body of a man. My blood ran cold as I recognized him. It was Old Man Erickson, whose farm bordered mine to the north. He'd always been a bit of a recluse, but I'd known him my whole life. How long had he been living with this curse? How many lives had he taken? The sound of approaching vehicles snapped me out of my shock. The gunshots had alerted the sheriff and half the town. As flashlight beams cut through the darkness and voices called out my name, I found myself rooted to the spot, staring at the body of a man I thought I knew. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire. Some believed it, some didn't. The official report called it an animal attack, with Erickson as another victim. But those of us who were there that night, we knew the truth. We'd seen the body change, seen the monster become a man. Life in our little town was never the same after that. We became known as the place where the werewolf of Wisconsin was killed. Tourists and thrill seekers would come, hoping to catch a glimpse of something supernatural. But for those of us who lived through it, the terror was all too real. I still farm these lands, still tend to my cattle. But now when the full moon rises and the wind carries strange howls from the distant hills, I make sure my rifle is loaded with silver bullets, because I know the truth that most people refuse to believe. Monsters are real and they're far closer than we'd like to think. Sometimes on quiet nights, I find myself staring out at the woods where it all happened. I can't help but wonder, was Erickson the only one? Are there more out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moon to full and their bestial nature to take over? The thought keeps me up at night, my hand never far from my rifle. The scars on my chest have healed, but the memories remain as fresh as ever. Every full moon, I relive that night. The glowing eyes, the inhuman strength, the moment of realization as the monster became a man I'd known all my life. It's a burden I'll carry for the rest of my days. I've tried to move on, to focus on my farm and my family. Sarah's been my rock through all of this, even though I know she struggles with it too. We don't talk about that night much, but sometimes I catch her looking at me with a mix of concern and something else. Fear, maybe. Not of me, but of what I've seen, what I've done. The town has changed too. There's a wariness now, an undercurrent of tension that wasn't there before. People are more cautious after dark, more suspicious of newcomers. The old sense of small-town trust has been replaced by something darker, more primal. We've all been reminded that the veneer of civilization is thinner than we'd like to believe. I've become something of a local legend, the man who killed the werewolf. Some see me as a hero, others as a crackpot who got lucky with a wild animal. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. I don't feel like a hero. Most days I just feel tired. Tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of jumping at shadows, tired of wondering if there are more out there. But I can't stop. I won't stop. Because if there are more werewolves out there, someone needs to be ready. Someone needs to know the truth, to be prepared to do what needs to be done. And so I keep my vigil, night after night, season after season. I've started keeping a journal, documenting everything I can remember about that night and the events leading up to it. Maybe someday it'll help someone else who finds themselves face to face with the impossible. Or maybe it'll just be the ramblings of a man who's seen too much, believed too much. Only time will tell. As I write this, the sun is setting, casting long shadows across the fields. In a few hours, the moon will rise, full and bright. I can feel the familiar tension building in my muscles, the hyper-awareness of every sound, every movement. I'll be out there tonight as I am every full moon, patrolling the borders of my land, rifle in hand. Because now I know the truth. Monsters are real. They walk among us, hidden in plain sight until the moon calls to the beast within. And when that happens, when man becomes monster, someone needs to be there to protect the innocent. Someone needs to be the hunter. That someone is me. John Hawkins, farmer, husband, werewolf hunter. This is my story, my warning to the world. Be vigilant, be prepared. Because in the dark of night, when the moon is full and the wind carries strange howls, the line between man and beast blurs, and in that blurring, terror awaits. As I finish writing this account, I can't help but wonder about the future. Will my children inherit this burden? Will they grow up in a world where the existence of werewolves is common knowledge? Or will they, like me, have to learn the hard way? I hope for their sake that my encounter was a one-time thing, that Old Man Erickson was the last of his kind. But deep down, I know better. The world is a bigger, stranger place than most people realize. There are dark corners where ancient magic still holds sway, where the impossible becomes possible under the light of the full moon. I've seen it with my own eyes, felt it with my own hands, and now I can never go back to the blissful ignorance of my former life. So I'll keep watch. I'll stand guard over my little corner of the world, ready to face whatever horrors the night might bring. Because that's what it means to truly understand the nature of the world we live in. It's not just about farming anymore. It's about protecting, surviving, and maybe, just maybe, ensuring that the next generation can sleep a little easier, knowing that there are those of us out here, standing between them and the monsters in the dark. To anyone reading this, I say, be careful out there. The night is dark and full of terrors, and not all of them can be explained away by science or reason. Keep your wits about you, trust your instincts, and remember, when the moon is full and the wolves begin to howl, it might not just be ordinary wolves you're hearing. This is John Hawkins, signing off. The sun is set and the moon is rising. It's time for me to begin my patrol. Wish me luck, and if you're ever in rural Wisconsin during a full moon, well, maybe it's best if you stay indoors. Some hunts are best left to those who've stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Stay safe out there, folks. And remember, the monsters are real, but so are the hunters. And as long as there's breath in my body, I'll be out here, keeping watch. Because someone has to. Someone has to stand against the darkness. Good night and good luck. You're going to need it.